Hello there and welcome to Creative Autistic. Today I'm going to be talking about something that you might not think would be the most obvious thing to talk about in relation to autism, but it's driving. As a high-masking autistic person, it's the one area in my life where I've really struggled to keep the mask on at times because I find driving and being a passenger really stressful at times. So I'm going to talk about my experience as a car passenger first of all, and it's probably helpful to go right back to the beginning and talk about when I was a child. And my parents didn't have a car, and neither of them drove, in fact. And because they both had issues with alcohol dependency, I think that was probably for the best, really. But because we lived in a small town, everything was really easily accessible. It didn't feel necessary to have a car, so I didn't really feel like I'd missed out in any way. And because I didn't have a lot of experience of being in a car as a child, it probably didn't help in terms of the anxiety that it sometimes causes me. But I'm just a really dreadful passenger, even now. I've just always found driving, or certainly being a passenger in a car, really quite anxiety inducing. I think because I'm not able to make the decisions, obviously, that the driver is making, that it just can be quite anxiety inducing here and there, and particularly whenever we're going fast. And I really hate, in particular, being on motorways, and it can cause Ian quite a lot of stress as well because I'm quite often in panic mode, and it's generally when there's like a big lorry passing and all the noise and kind of sensory issues that it causes, and also in changing lanes as well can be really quite sort of overwhelming for me, depending on if there's a lot of traffic there. And yeah, I just find it stressful. And also because now that I know that I'm an autistic person, I can really look back and make sense of some stuff that went on. And for instance, I've always found it really difficult to talk in cars. I think because there's just so much going on and I'm really focusing on my surroundings and my environment, that it's just too much really to try and have any kind of conversation. And this obviously is an example of selective mutism, and I can only recognise that through my adult eyes, and that's an adult autistic person, because I just used to really wonder why people can be yabbering away at each other while they're on a car journey, and I've just never been able to do it. I've just found it just too much. And I've always really struggled with car sickness as well, and particularly if I'm in the back of a car and it's a journey over 20 minutes, say, so I'll always have to sit in the front passenger seat, which can be really quite stressful because I don't want anybody to think that I'm a drama queen or anything like that. So yeah, it's caused no end of issues, I have to say. So my first experience of learning to drive was in my early 20s, and I just decided that I wanted to learn to drive because I thought it might be useful just to be able to get around. Perhaps it would open up some opportunities for me in my work life. Perhaps it would help to enhance my social life in some way. All the typical reasons why a young person would want to learn to drive. And I think I had around 10 to 12 lessons, and it was in a manual car, and I just found it really stressful, and I just couldn't pick up anything. I would really dread my lessons for a couple of days beforehand, and when you're getting that much anxiety building up about something, I don't think you're ever going to learn anything. So I thought, this isn't for me. So I just knocked it on the head and thought maybe I'll try again at some point. But for me right now, this isn't happening. So when I hit my late 20s, I started to feel like I was really missing out in not being able to drive. all of my friends were able to drive, and I felt like I was missing out on potential job opportunities, social stuff. So I thought I'd like to try and give this another go. And I'd recently spoken to somebody who'd had similar difficulties to me in trying to learn to drive, and she really recommended learning in an automatic car because she found it way easier, because there's a lot less that you have to think about essentially while you're driving. So I found a driving instructor who specialised in automatic lessons, and I have to say it was a lot easier. I still found the whole process at times really difficult because there is a lot that you have to think about and constantly be aware of, but because I didn't have the whole manual system to think about as well, it just kind of took a bit of pressure off, and I had, I think, around 30 lessons in all, and I passed my test on the second attempt, which I felt actually quite proud of considering it's something that doesn't really come naturally to me. The first test I failed because I went too fast in a 30 zone, and I think I was just too nervous as well, but yeah, I was super pleased to pass on my second attempt. So once I was nearing taking my test, I wanted to get a car because I thought it would act as a really good source of motivation. You know, you don't want to have a car sat there for very long if you're not able to drive it. And I've always loved classic Minis. But although Minis are really beautiful, they very nearly always come with a manual engine. So I didn't think I'd be able to get one, but I found one that was for sale quite locally to me with an automatic engine, and I was just ecstatic at the thought of being able to have one. And it was a Japanese import, but it was still a right-hand drive, so it suited me being able to drive in the UK, and I just loved it. The only thing I would say, however, is that it had an awful cherry bomb exhaust attached to it when I first got it, and having driven it around for around 2 weeks with this hellish noise going on, and just the whole embarrassment of driving around with something creating all that din, I then got a normal exhaust put on it, and I just absolutely loved this car. It became a special interest of mine, and for whatever reason, I think because I loved the car so much, it really helped me in terms of my nerves and driving. And I had that car for about 2 years, I think, but because it was essentially a collector's item, it wasn't designed to be driven around kind of every day like I was doing with it. And yeah, it just finally packed up a couple of years later, and I was really sad about it, but I just still have all these lovely memories of driving around in a car that I genuinely loved. So at this point, I thought I might be able to salvage the Mini and the engine problems it was having. It basically needed a new engine at this point, but I decided to get a really cheap runaround just to use while I was deciding what to do with the Mini. And it was a really old Ford Fiesta 4-door, and at this point I was working in a different town, so I needed a car to be able to get to and from work. And the difference in driving a car that I genuinely loved and, you know, this old banger was just immense. I've immediately found it way more stressful. It was physically a much bigger car. And also, where I was working, there was a few students working there who lived in the town that I was living in, and they asked if they could basically bum a ride with me to and from work every day. And because I didn't know how to say no, I said yes, really. And the reason why I wanted to say no was because I knew how stressful I'd find driving with others in the car. And yeah, boy, did I. So I'd have 3 or 4 passengers with me every day, and it was a journey of about maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. And they were all really gregarious types, so they'd be sort of chatting away to each other and trying to talk to me as well while I was driving. And I just found it really stressful. And I used to think, why do I find this so stressful? I can't see evidence of other people that I know who drive feeling this kind of stressed out or this wired while they're driving. I just couldn't make sense of it really. And because of being this unofficial designated driver every day, it was one of the reasons why I chose to leave this job, because I just couldn't cope with it and I didn't know how to say to the people that were getting lifts off me, I find this really stressful. Do you mind if we just don't do it? Just found it easier just to leave the job, and I did. So not long after that, I realised that the Mini was basically dead and buried, and I just couldn't revive her, and it made me really sad because she felt like a little character in my life. So at this point I thought I need another car, and because of the stresses of having lots of passengers in the four-door, I thought I'm going to get a smart car for two people, because I know that the absolute maximum of people I'll be able to take in my car with me at any one time is one. So I found a smart online that was within my budget, and it was available for sale maybe an hour away, and I went for a test drive, and I remember thinking, not wholly sure about this car. It was a semi-automatic, so it wasn't full automatic, but just felt really different to both the Mini and the Fiesta. But I thought, if I don't get this car, it's, I don't know what else I'm going to do. So essentially I bought it on the day, and for whatever reason, I just never felt very comfortable in that car. It wasn't the design or how small it felt, because I actually quite liked how it looked and how it felt. It was just how it drove really. I was just never convinced by how good it was a car, and it didn't feel kind of super responsive. Like for instance, when you're going towards a roundabout and you stop, the car just never felt like it was responsive enough to, have that bit of oomph that you need to be able to make a decision quite fast. So it just didn't feel like the safest car to me somehow. And needless to say, that didn't really help my anxiety. Not long after I had this car, maybe about 6 months, I was driving along one day and there was an almighty bang that came from the front of the car, and I just was so overwhelmed by what on earth that was. So I took it to the garage, and they were able to deduce that one of the springs had basically snapped at the front of the car, which was a really common thing to happen in this particular model of smart car. And needless to say, I was just really concerned that that was going to happen again. And it just never ever left my mind. For the whole time that I had that car thereafter, I was just almost semi-prepared for this explosion to go off at any point. So if you're already nervous about driving, or if you have any kind of anxiety around driving, that isn't going to help at all really. So I only had the Smart for a few years because it eventually broke down and it was just too difficult to repair really. But I didn't go through a whole mourning process like I did with the Mini. I was just really sad that I'd paid for a car and it was no longer functioning really. So I've never been very lucky when it comes to cars, I have to say. So in terms of driving itself as an axe, I've kind of been okay in town areas and in zones of like 30 or 40 miles an hour, and the quieter a road is, the more I enjoy the experience of driving actually. And certainly in the Mini, I found it really quite a nice thing to do on a quiet road. But motorways, crikey, I don't know how people do it. I went on a motorway once in my life and it was just such a terrible experience that I've just never been able to do it again. Basically, I was trying to get onto the motorway and there was a huge lorry that essentially blocked off the entrance. And I still can't believe he did it. So I had to come to an absolute stop before I could try and get on the motorway. And needless to say, I was super stressed out about it. And because that was my very first experience of driving on a motorway, it just never ever happens again. I thought there's no way. I would rather take A roads and B roads, even if it takes way longer as a journey. I'm just not prepared to put myself through it. There's also some observations that I've been making about myself as a driver and as a passenger through, my eyes as a late diagnosed autistic person. And transitions in terms of car journeys have always caused me quite a lot of stress, really. For instance, I've always had this thing where I just really do not like getting out of a car in a service station. And service stations are crucial, aren't they? They provide a much needed break to drivers that need to get refreshed, have some food, have some drink, just get their eyes off the road for a while. But I've just always found them difficult, and it's only now that I'm kind of appreciating why. I just often felt unprepared for a service station stop. That's quite a difficult set of words to say. But as a high masking individual, it's just another example where I think, oh gosh, I've got to go off now and pretend to be normal for a bit, when actually I'd just rather be in the car and making, the rest of the journey happen. This is almost a bit of an inconvenience, but yeah, it's only now that I'm kind of appreciating why I've had difficulties in that way, really. And also, I get road rage really easily. Um, yeah, it's just something that I've often struggled with. I get really stressed out if people are behaving in a stupid way or if they're doing something dangerous. And yeah, I find it really difficult to kind of come down from that anger, I have to say. So I haven't driven now for about 3 or 4 years, and basically I had a car accident at that time, and it was nothing dangerous. I was in a car park, and because Ian's car was way fancier than any car I've had, it had parking sensors on, and for whatever reason they just weren't working. So essentially I reversed into some bloke's car and he just went nuts about it. There was no calming him. I was trying to say to him, everybody has accidents. It wasn't done on purpose. There was only a tiny amount of damage, but yeah, he just wanted to go for it. And we went through insurance in the end, and it was all sorted out. But because I wasn't a particularly confident driver, even then, I decided I needed a break from driving. So yeah, it's not something that I've done for the last few years. I'm home based anyway through chronic illness, so I don't actually need to drive at the moment. So Ian does all of our driving. So will I ever drive again? I'd like to think that I would. As I've mentioned earlier in this video, I actually really enjoy driving on a really quiet road. There's something quite almost therapeutic and a bit meditative as a process, but in the UK it's so rare that you're able to get any opportunity to drive in under those circumstances. But yeah, it's something that I enjoy, so I suspect I'll drive again at some point, but for now I'm happy taking a break, I think. So anyway, I would love to hear your experience of driving as an autistic person. Is it something that, like me, has given you a lot of angst over the years, a lot of stress, a lot of worry? Or is it something that you absolutely love doing? Or is it somewhere in between? So, as with other autism and videos, what I'd like to do is to essentially go through your comments in a follow-up video. So by all means, leave your experiences down below. I think it's just interesting to hear other people's experiences as well, rather than, just hearing my take on everything. I think it just helps the community to feel a bit more involved, really. So I think that's going to be it for today. Happy driving. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.